the 6th grade class could hardly contain themselves as they heard the news. Billy Alanis was being skipped ahead to the 9th grade. That meant that they would no longer have to worry about looking stupid all the time or hear the teacher praise him for another perfect score. Best of all, they would not have to listen to Billy remind them about how smart he was. Even his friends were tired of hearing him insult them all the time. On his last day of class with the 6th graders, his friend Timothy reminded him not to get too mouthy with the 9th graders. Tim knew from experience with his older brother that these guys were not as likely to take his insults. Billy could not believe his luck. He was certainly tired of being held back with other kids his age, even though he knew he was much smarter than them. What made it worse was that Billy was on the small size. Only Chrissy Carlson was smaller than his 4 feet 11 inches frame. He had to look up to everyone, and it made it tough to insult people who were taller than him. However, it did not stop him from doing so, and it got him into trouble. Billy knew it would mean trouble for him if he insulted the wrong guy in his new class. He pledged to himself to be a lot nicer, but old habits die hard. It was a mild fall day when Billy arrived at 1st District High School for his initial day of 9th grade. For someone who was almost 3 years younger than everyone else, he did not seem nervous. Instead, he was a bit on the cocky side, thinking to himself how easy it would be to instantly become the smartest person in the class. He knew that it would be much tougher to gain friends, but he was too concerned with being the best. Billy took a comb to his short blonde hair as he entered the school. Making his way to his homeroom class of biology, he could not help but notice all the stares of the older students. Fortunately though, 1st District was a top-flight high school and all of its students behaved like angels. No insults came flying his way, and he arrived at the biology classroom with little fanfare. He thought to himself, maybe I will fit in better with these older kids. A smile came upon his face that quickly dissipated as he entered the classroom and realized that someone was sitting in his favorite spot. Billy clenched his fist and gave an icy stare to the 9th grader sitting in the center chair of the center row. Steve Carlson looked the short and rather young-looking boy who just walked through the doorway. Steve was always the first to arrive at class. He was the class president and had plenty of things to do before the bell rung. The center seat was unofficially his because he also laid claim to the title of smartest person in class and most popular student. His friends always needed to be around him just so they could catch some of the Carlson karma. So it came as quite a shock when his greeting to the new student was met with a snappy comeback. "Good morning, I'm Steve Carlson, class president, nice to meet you. What are you doing in my seat?" Billy responded without thinking. Steve flashed him an indignant look and decided to respond in a similar manner, "I appear to be sitting in it. And I guess it is not nice to meet you." He went back to reading the notes on his science fair project. Billy took a seat in the front of the room in the same row as Steve. His face was turning red, as he could not believe that someone would have the nerve to talk back to him like that. He was Mr. High and Mighty, the first 6th grader to ever be passed ahead to the 9th grade during the school year. An ego was bruised and it would demand some sort of revenge. A tap to the ear turned on his trusty hearing aid, that faithful tool which had allowed him to overhear some of the insults his old classmates were planning to dish out. That way, Billy would be able to come up with a return insult that left them stopped dead in their tracks. He had invented the hearing aid himself, and it was the primary reason he wanted to sit in the center of the room. The device had a very short range, and sitting in the front of the room made it difficult to hear anything behind of Steve. Once it was on, he heard Steve mutter something about the goofy new kid. That settled things. Billy began to plot his revenge. The rest of the class started to settle in, and most of them said hello to Billy, but they quickly moved back by Steve. Miss Smith, the biology teacher, arrived to start class. She started off by introducing everyone to Billy, who tried to stay as low-key as possible. He was too busy listening to a conversation by Steve to his friend Mike. Steve was telling Mike about his science fair project and how it involved brainwaves and a device, which read the subconscious. Miss Smith announced to the class, "Okay class, today is the day you present your science fair ideas. Billy, you will be excused for today since you just started." Billy seized the opportunity and blurted out, "That is quite all right, Miss Smith. I have been working on a little project involving the mind and reading brainwaves. I don't have my stuff with me, but I will certainly be able to show it to you tomorrow." He smiled and realized that it would be quite difficult for Steve to give Miss Smith a topic that was similar to his, even if Billy had stolen it from him. The look on Steve's face had to have been priceless, if only he could have seen it. Faces turned to shock around Steve. This scrawny little newcomer had the same topic as Steve and had managed to get it to Miss Smith before him. What was the class president going to do? Steve stood up and started to give his presentation, but Miss Smith stopped him midway through. "This seems an awful lot like what Billy is going to do. Steven, do you think you could change your project to something else? I have confidence in your abilities to find another topic by tomorrow." "Yes, I think that would be possible," he responded. Secretly though, it would not be possible because too much time had been spent working on his science fair project. In fact, because there was going to be other things going on before the fair, Steve had finished his project before this date even arrived. As he returned to his seat, he shot an icy glare in Billy's direction. The nice guy exterior was severely wounded by Billy's act. Steve whispered to his friends about an idea he had. Billy tried to listen in but could only make out something about the device, a magician, and a first prize-winning new idea he had. As soon as the bell rung, Billy made it out of the classroom before he could be confronted. The rest of the day went very badly as Steve's friends made it a point to come up and taunt Billy. Even though they were unaware of the hearing aid, they still accused Billy of being an idea stealer. The normally quick-witted Billy was unable to respond since he knew he had stolen the idea. However, he felt no remorse for what he had done because the revenge was too sweet. At the end of the day, he went to his locker hoping to get out of there as quickly as possible. "Hey, smarty pants." Billy turned around to see Mike, the kid who always sat next to Steve, standing behind him. Billy feared the worst but was surprised to hear what Mike had to say. "You better be careful, because Steve is the most popular kid in the 9th grade. He has a lot of friends, including myself, that get help from him on classwork. If he isn't happy, we aren't happy. I am sorry for allowing all the taunting to go on today, but you needed to learn a lesson. Do you think you learned your lesson?" Billy flashed a fake smile. "Yes. I'm sorry his idea is the same as mine. I will tell the teacher tomorrow that I am changing my topic. I hope we can be friends." Billy put out his hand to shake. His small girlish hand was given a friendly squeeze by Mike. "I guess we can be friends. Say, you want to come to see a special magic show later this afternoon?" "Sure, I love magic," Billy responded. Mike gave him a location and a time. Billy saw that Mike had written down, "Don't be late," on the piece of paper. After thanking him, Billy shut his locker and started to head out the door. He glanced back and noticed Mike and Steve talking something over. Billy smiled, thinking to himself, "Boy, is he going to be surprised when he finds out that I ain't changing my topic." His first day in the 9th grade turned out to be eventful, but little did Billy know that the last bit of revenge would be on him. Billy went home and left his parents a note about where he would be heading. He barely stayed home long enough to grab a drink before he was back out the door. The thought crossed his mind that something might have been up. He had not heard about any magic show up until this point, and magic was one of his favorite pastimes. That was no matter, however, as Billy ran to get to the auditorium so he would have the best seat. All the running caused the 12-year-old boy to be dead tired when he finally arrived. When he got there, he noticed that the doors were locked even though the show was supposed to start in 30 minutes. No one was around, so he knocked on the door. A face suddenly appeared at the door. "Who are you?" "My name is Billy Alanis and I'm here for the magic show." "Oh yes, come inside." The door was opened by a young college student about 6 feet tall. He was dressed in a black tuxedo. "My name is Greg. I'm the magician, so you're the one I'm here to see?" A smile eased out of Greg's mouth. "I guess you could say that. You're a bit early. The show does not start for another hour. Perhaps you would like a brief tour backstage?" "You must be a mind reader as well," Billy chuckled. Greg laughed and took Billy's hand and led him backstage and showed him around. He pointed out a couple of boxes and a variety of other props. Billy was in heaven getting to see all the magic stuff. The tour was over in about 15 minutes and ended in Greg's dressing room. "Hey Billy, I've got to finish getting ready for the show. Perhaps you would like a drink before you head back to your seat?" "Sure, I am still a little thirsty from running here." Greg went behind a screen to get a glass and a soda. An evil smile came across his face as he poured the drink. He thought to himself, "This kid certainly loves magic. That is so perfect." He finished pouring the drink and came out from behind the screen. Billy almost ran over to get the glass but waited for Greg to give it to him. As he gulped it down, he noticed an odd taste about this soda, something he could not quite place. Greg stepped back as he saw Billy start to get a little woozy. Billy heard the door open and turned around to see who it was, but ended up collapsing on the floor. The last sight he saw was Steve and Mike entering the room carrying a bundle. He heard Steve mutter something about having a device before falling completely unconscious. "I have the device ready to go, Greg." "Thanks for all your help," Steve said to Mike's brother Greg. "You are welcome. I have been looking for a new assistant since my girlfriend left me." Now Mike was telling me about this subconscious thought manipulator you had been working on. When he called me today about his little idea, I was first a little apprehensive, but after seeing this kid, I think it may work. He likes magic enough to be useful to me. As long as he can pull off the first trick, the rest won't matter. Here, let's get the device on him so he will have plenty of time to get his new way of thinking. Steve pulled out a small device that looked a lot like Billy's hearing aid. He bent down to put the hearing aid in when he noticed the hearing aid already in place. Well, what do you know? This kid was already wearing a hearing aid. Lucky for us, so he won't realize what we have done. Yeah, Mike replied. Then again, Steve, we could always put into his head the thought that if he takes it out, he'll suffer severe pain. That's excellent. You're always thinking. Get out the control device and start implanting thoughts into his head. This should be sufficient revenge for stealing my idea. Greg, you and I will get him ready for her big performance. Steve smiled and unrolled the bundle, and it contained a few of the items necessary to turn young Billy into a brand new girl. Greg started to undo Billy's clothes while Mike sat down and was talking into the control device. After a few minutes, Billy lay there naked on the floor, his smallish frame a stark contrast to the older boys in the room. Steve took a special piece of cloth with a small hole in it and put it into place over Billy's male genitalia. The cloth held itself into place and made Billy look feminine. Greg handed Steve a pair of black fishnet tights. Do you think these clothes will fit him? Steve asked. I was concerned at first, but after seeing him, he is about the same size as my last assistant. I think it should work. The fishnet tights were rolled up and slowly slid up Billy's smooth legs. They were pulled over his newly redone crotch and up to his waist. A special bra was pulled out next and slipped over his chest. It would help give him the appearance of young and fresh breasts. Mike had to stop talking into the control device and had to assist with the next piece. It took all three of them to slide a blue leotard onto him. The leotard was shiny and had little sequin patterns all over it and the very skinny shoulder straps. Little fringe hung off the legs and helped hide some of Billy's thighs. Mike returned to implanting the thoughts while Steve finished off the outfit by sliding a pair of black ballet slippers onto Billy's delicate little feet. Steve stood up and looked down. Well, look at the little cutie in her new outfit. I think Mr. Alanis needs a new name, don't you think so, Greg? Not to mention some makeup, Greg said. How about Alana? You said his last name is Alanis. Works for me. Except for the makeup part. I got him this far. Can you help with that? Greg grinned and propped Billy up and went to work. Years of having to put on stage makeup for his performances finally paid off for someone other than himself. A little bit of this and a little bit of that was splashed on Billy. In the end, all that was left was a new hairdo. A quick fix with a razor to get rid of all the old blonde hair and a brand spanking new brown-haired wig was placed on top. The hair helped cover the ears just enough so that no one would notice the device. Alana was complete, at least from an appearance standpoint. The guys sat around looking at the newly transformed boy. Even they were amazed at how Billy looked a lot more like a girl. Well, Alana, are you ready for your new job? Steve asked. They laughed as they knew that Alana couldn't respond because she was unconscious. However, it wouldn't last for much longer as an hour had passed while they took their revenge. Greg lifted Alana into his arms and carried her out onto the stage. Mike and Steve opened a box that laid on a table. Alana was placed carefully into the box and stretched out. Stocks were placed over top of her ankles and her neck. No sooner than the stock was locked into place over top of her neck when Alana started to stir. She groggily muttered in a masculine voice, "What happened?" Her eyes were still shut and she had not moved the rest of her body. "You were having a drink and you passed out," Greg responded. "We had to lay you down. I hope you didn't mind." "Not at all," Alana said. She stirred some more and upon opening her eyes noticed that she was locked into a box. Why am I lying in the sawing a girl in half box? And for some reason, I feel very strange. She turned her head to the side and saw Steve and Mike standing there. "What are you doing here?" "Why, it's simple really. I'm gaining some revenge and helping a friend at the same time. Remember my science fair project? Well, it implants thoughts into a person's subconscious and activates them with reinforcement from conscious thoughts. You get to be my guinea pig." Alana shook against the box and started to yell out, but no one was around and no one was going to be around. She heard a voice cry out in her head that sounded a lot like Mike's. Start talking in a more feminine voice. A confused look crossed her face as conflicting thoughts passed through her. One thought was saying that her name was Billy Alanis, 12-year-old boy, while another was telling her that Billy Alanis was a figment of her imagination and that Alana Lieb was who she was, 12-year-old girl and magician's assistant to the amazing Gregory. Her screams started to turn more higher-pitched until they were very painful to the ear. "That's enough, Alana. You are causing a commotion. Say hi to Gregory, he's going to be your boss, my boss." "What do you mean?" Alana asked. "What have you done?" "Let's just say, we've given you a few enhancements that will make you more useful. Greg was telling us how much he needed a new assistant and we thought you might be able to help out. Especially after this morning. I won't let you do it." Alana struggled some more before stopping to listen to the voices in her head. They were getting stronger and stronger. Her voice remained feminine. Thoughts were going through her head about how much she wanted to be an assistant and a pretty girl. She thought she saw Mike talking into something but couldn't stop hearing his voice in her head. There was nothing she could do to stop it as she was trapped in the box. She ran her hands down her side and realized she was in odd clothes. Why am I in these strange clothes? What am I wearing? The guys started to respond when Greg returned with a saw. He smiled. How are you doing? Ready for the first illusion? No, get me out. Alana stopped and changed thoughts. Yes, I am ready. Steve and Mike smiled as they could see that the device was working. Of course, they had to put a thought into his head that would make him forget their involvement in this little bit of revenge. But that would wait, as they wanted to see Greg saw him in half. Greg bent over and whispered something to Alana. She smiled as Greg started to saw through the box. A scream came from Alana's mouth. The two spectators were startled. Greg paid no attention to the scream as he placed two blades into the spot where he had just sawed. He then took the divided box and broke it out into two pieces. The guys clapped and started whistling. Greg laughed and told them to cut it out. He put the two halves of the box back together and carefully removed the blades. He started to unlock the stalks when Steve said, "Hold on a second. I want to make sure nothing unusual happens. Are you going to be good if we let you out of the box?" Alana responded in a giddy girlish voice, "Of course, silly Steve, this is what I'm trained to do." Mike looked cautiously at Steve. "I don't know, Steve, I haven't put any new thoughts into his head for a couple of minutes. He may be faking it." "What do you mean I'm faking it? Why are you calling me he, Mike?" "My name is Alana Lieb, magician's assistant to the amazing Gregory." She giggled and looked around. "All right then. Greg, let her out." Greg carefully opened the box and Alana jumped up and out of the box. She stood up and got down from the box while looking at the three guys. What they didn't know was that Steve's little science fair project had worked a little too well. The subconscious thoughts were already becoming permanently etched into her brain. The drug they had used to knock Billy out aided in that process. Any extra thoughts were only reinforcing the rest of her body into believing that Billy Alanis was really Alana Lieb. That was great fun, guys. Can we do another illusion? No, Alana, I think it is time for you to head home, Steve responded. He nodded to Mike and Mike flipped the switch on the control. Steve expected a sudden change in Alana's personality. However, she stood there looking down at her new costume and giggling. They could not understand what was going on. When the control unit was turned off, Billy's old personality should have been back. Admittingly, he would not be happy with what had happened, but he had put a thought to prevent that in her head, or had he? "Wait a second, Mike," he tried to say, but it was too late. Mike had flipped the switch. Nothing happened, however. "What's wrong, Steve?" Mike asked. Steve stood there and looked at Greg. "I don't know. We forgot to put that thought into his head about not getting mad, and yet, nothing happens, I know." Greg smiled. "It must be magic. I told you guys I needed a new assistant. Not just one for the evening but for shows. Are you saying that he is still going to be a she?" Steve and Mike looked dumbfounded and tried to give a logical answer. Alana stood off in the background and ran a hand down her crotch, thinking to herself, "I don't know why these boys keep thinking I am one of them. Can't they see how cute I look in my costume?" She smiled and quietly slipped off stage while the three boys argued over her. She heard them mention something about Billy Alanis, his parents, and how it was his first day in the 9th grade after skipping 2 grades. Of course, that didn't concern her as she only cared about being a magician's assistant. One last thought passed through her head as she went back to the dressing room to fix her costume. I wonder who this Billy Alanis was. He sounds like a real smarty pants. Maybe he would be able to help them fix their device. She giggled and said, if only he were around.